So before I talk about the composition of this piece and what's been happening here, I just want to mention the cabin blocks. It's a very traditional block, and I'm sure most of you know how it's constructed. You start somewhere, and then you put a little piece of fabric next to it, and then you start going around. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you keep going around. And what I wanted to mention is that I normally, because it's me, I consider it a 9 patch. So I use 9 scraps of fabric, and I've been making a couple of them here. And I want to talk about seams, but these I'm doing with just a regular running stitch seam, which is, the first basic kind of seam that you would think of. And this is something that can also be done on a sewing machine, because it's just putting 2 fabrics together. This is my last one here, and doing a straight seam and then turning it like this. So that's nothing new. And then when you get, for me, I always kind of press the seams open. I did this with my fingers. A lot of people will press them to one side. I think for me, the way I sew with all the layers and all the extra glue stitching and all that stuff, I press them open because I like to keep the surface that I might be stitching through, because I do a lot of embellishment. I like to keep it thin. So I kind of did that. And then normally, I would do my glue stitch to hold that open, because it gets kind of fussy, especially with smaller pieces. This way, while I'm working, I don't accidentally bunch it up. But today, I just wanted to mention another kind of glue stitching, which I've started to use lately, and that is the crisscross method. Again, I'm holding this open, and instead of taking a stitch and going all the way across and then coming all the way back, I go back and forth, and I do this a lot lately. I don't know, because I realized it was kind of a shortcut. It's a good start. So I'm taking a tiny little back stitch, and then I'm crossing over to the other side, and of course I'm holding that open and trying to catch the, great, I pulled the thing out, trying to catch the piece behind. I can't tell you how many times I do this while I'm sewing. Okay, good thing I still have eyes. So I'm a little back stitch and then crossing over to the other side of the seam. And that is holding this open. But I mean, maybe I have, yeah, this one's more visible. You can see that the long stitch goes back and forth across. Now, this has been working really well for me lately, so the whole idea is to take that little invisible stitch on the surface and a long stitch on the back, just to keep it in place. I'm also using my thread ends. Those are like scraps to me too. But over time, technique changes, and I've started to want to say that I don't always do everything the same every single time. And I may not do this on short seams, or sometimes I may not do it at all if I'm working with a small seam and I don't really need to worry about it shifting. And sometimes the stitches show, that's okay. And I also don't knot that often. because it is just a basting stitch. And you can see how that goes back and forth. And I did both sides at one time. So these are so easy and tiny that I'm really playing a lot because I have all these tiny pieces, and this type of project is so portable. Here I decided to experiment a little bit, making it a little bit more painterly, because these fabrics have been kind of dyed in sort of a watercolory way. Piece of Deb's fabric here. Also, sometimes woven fabrics work really nicely. Here, it's the cross, like you see here, where two colors were woven across each other, and I dyed around that because I really like the circles with the crosshairs like that. And also kind of symbolizes a clock to me, or a compass. But also the seam itself, not the seam, but the change in color itself on a yarn dyed pattern can almost create another sense of complexity to patchwork. So I'm doing a bunch of these. You know, it's like almost like sometimes playing paper dolls, just to see how things might work in the same situation. So I place these on the fabric and sew them down, and then I draw the details of the cat and fill them in. So maybe I'll do a couple more, or maybe I will do something else with these. You know, it's a framing method that's, you know, it's a spiral, but it's also a framing method, and framing is very much on my mind. Even frame of mind is on my mind. So there's a lot of focuses. I think the first cabins I did were moon cabins, but you know, there's other options. I could have put a 9 patch in there, or anything, actually. Anything. Maybe even stitch a little basket in